if you're struggling to get back into the dating world because of past unhealthy relationships and partners who have created this sense of distrust and unsafety, then this video is for you. My latest dance of polarity conversation was wonderful, where the contributor had this beautiful reflection that it's by showing oneself love unconditionally that creates genuine safety and then allows for authentic connection with others. And if you're wondering how to do that, then by the end of this video, I'm going to speak into and explain just how to do it. Hi, my name is David, relationship consultant through Sex.Prayers with my partner Tiffany, as well as that offering clarity consultation using mind yoga. Mind yoga is the combination of tantric philosophy with modern therapeutic practices to redesign the architecture of the mind, to unlimit those thoughts that have been preventing you from surrendering fully into love, life, and success. Let me speak into this last conversation that I had. It was really, really a beautiful conversation. This person was so kind in sharing their time with me and their experience. They spoke into how it's been years now that they have not been in a relationship and not even entertained men because of what happened in their past. They were in a very unhealthy relationship. They were experiencing infidelity and lying and distrust, and that kind of just, that end of that relationship just tarnished and dissuaded them from wanting to engage again. And years have gone by and they're just about feeling ready to re-enter the dating world. But there's some challenge in that. They recognize that there is this sense of distrust. When I asked, what does safety mean to you? I had such a beautiful response. So we got there together, I think, mostly from her, is safety is being able to express oneself fully and have that received, even if not accepted. Even if it's not agreed with, it doesn't need to be disagreed with. It's merely just being able to express oneself fully and have that be accepted. Kind of like, thank you, I hear you, and thank you for expressing that part of yourself. It doesn't need to be acted on in any way other than to just be accepted. And I really like that definition of safety. And this person spoke into that there's this reluctance to step back into the dating world because it partly feels unsafe. There's a risk. There is the possibility or the danger of being rejected, and the emotional turmoil that comes with that. And really, through the course of the conversation, we came to realize that in being able to be honest with oneself, then it doesn't matter if the other person accepts it or not. There's this sense of, well, I trust, I can feel safe within myself. And being safe within myself is being able to fully accept how it is that I'm feeling and what it is that I'm wanting to express. Put short, this sense of safety is actually self-acceptance. It's self-love. Being able to fully embrace and accept one's truth, one's experience, regardless of what it is. And in being able to do that, and being able to show oneself love unconditionally, it doesn't really matter what the person one is relating with feels or reacts or responds. Ideally, of course, there's this desire for someone to be able to accept what it is and be able to hold that and to hold their own emotional response and to be able to be honest. And this was one of the things that came up, is the irony of it is is that sometimes the person that we're with doesn't feel safe within themselves to be honest. And so really, it's this chicken and egg scenario. It's, well, who can go first in being able to be vulnerable and honest? And in doing so, knowing that being able to accept whatever happens and whatever one's experience is, that creates safety within oneself, which then invites safety for the other person. And it speaks into not having an expectation of how things are going or going to go. This speaks into the idea of Kriya and karma. I spoke into this with this person and they really, really enjoyed it, so I wanted to share into it here. In tantric teaching, you've likely heard of the word karma. It's a very popularized word, but not necessarily well understood. So karma, it's a word meaning action, but it has a twin. So its twin is kriya, also meaning action, but very, very different. So let me explain a little bit. Karmic action is action that is conditional. It's done with an expectation of a result. Kriya, on the other hand, is action that is done unconditionally. It's not dependent on an outcome or a result or an expectation. It is done purely for the joy of doing that thing. It is the difference between expressing something from within and looking to attain something from without. Very, very different concepts. So in the teachings, this idea of being able to express something that is inherent is the expression and path to the finding of joy, is the difference between pleasure and seeking something external. It's the difference between internal and external validation, or intrinsic and extrinsic value. Intrinsic value is something internally expressed, whereas extrinsic value is something externally attained. And because of the way that we navigate the world, the way that we aren't sufficiently educated, in the way that society and family and culture is conditioned and governed, it has this proclivity towards extrinsic value. And we forget about the intrinsic value that is inherent to us. So in the teachings, it's this idea that, well, it's this idea of non-duality. All there is, was, and ever will be is this one divine consciousness which gets to express itself freely in a myriad, a multiplicity of ways, that you, me, everything and everyone that exists is merely just a unique expression of this one divine consciousness. Let's put it this way. In a dream that you have, all the different characters and all the different places and all the different things, they are appearing differently, but they are fundamentally you. They're your consciousness just expressed in these different ways. And this is kind of the idea in Tantra, is this ocean of consciousness with these individual waves or unique expressions of localized consciousness. For another way, it's consciousness is looking out onto itself in an infinite, or through an infinite number of eyes. There's one thing looking at itself just with all of these different perspectives. Very, very brief introduction into non-duality. All of that to say, the essence nature, the intrinsic value that resides within you is this one divine universal consciousness. It's the whole universe within you wanting to express itself uniquely through you. You are just a unique expression of this God spark, unique divine consciousness, limitless potential that resides within. I'm over here because it speaks into the heart space. Different video, you can check out the Tantra Tuesday videos. We forget this. Necessarily so, it's an axiom of the human experience, and everything that then subsequently we experience in life, all the suffering that we experience, is pointing us back to this fundamental truth. And when we can get to that fundamental truth, then we get to enjoy all of the worldly enjoyment that is the human experience of sensuality and everything that comes with that, the sensual experience of human beingness. So speaking into the extrinsic value, we get lost and consumed by and obsessed with our ego expression, our limited sense of self, little I, because we can't become obsessed with it, and we still have this internal understanding, this unconscious understanding of our divine expressiveness. We try to fill that void with a plethora of things. We try to fill that void with life, with experiences, with money, with jobs, with sex, with products, with whatever you can think of. That's why none of it is fulfilling, because it's trying to fill an unlimited space with limited things. It's only by returning to the unlimited sense of self that we recognize that this infinite potential that resides within us isn't something that is a deficit. It's this invitation to expand into, and then everything that we enjoy through the limited sense of self is things for us to enjoy infused with this limitless sense of self. Off topic, kind of. This sense of Kriya speaks into action done for the joy purely of doing that thing. It doesn't matter what the outcome is. You're doing it because you get to express this beautiful part of yourself. It's not about attaining something, because you know at your core you're already perfectly whole. This person spoke into this idea of perfectionism that has been with them pretty much their entire life, and as a recovering perfectionist myself, I can very much understand and empathize and appreciate this. Where this sense of perfectionism comes from is, again, this part of us that recognizes deep within us somewhere. It's the part of us that yearns for something more than this tangible world. It's the part of us that yearns for God. It's part of us that yearns for beauty and all of that. It recognizes that there's this incorruptible, beautiful, blissfully free, divine part of us. And it mistakes the world and the things that we do with trying to fill that void. It's viewing it through the wrong end of the lens. When we can recognize that our limited sense of self isn't a deficit, it's not a not enoughness. When you can remember that you're perfectly whole, then the gap between where you are and where you're aiming for gets to be an invitation for expansion rather than a reminder of unworthiness. And for me, that was such a beautiful and important flip of perspective. It's recognizing that, oh, I get to continue moving into this limitless space, and that's a great thing. It's not pointing into me never feeling good enough and never being perfect enough and never having enough. It's saying, oh, I get to experience and enjoy all of that. And that's the difference between Kriya and Karma. This karmic idea of action is, I need to do this thing because I have an expectation of a particular result. And if I don't achieve that result or attain that result, then it's tainted energetically, it's tainted karmically. There's a karmic debt. It has this energy tied to it. If we can endeavor to move through the world from a place of kriya rather than karma, then whatever the outcome is irrelevant, because we've done it purely for the joy of just doing that thing. Yes, that's not to say that we can't want outcomes. Of course we can. It's part of human experience. But it's the compulsive attachment that creates the suffering that we experience. And if we can detach ourselves from that, then we can have the desire and the movement towards the thing without the suffering of not actually, one, being there already, or two, whether we get it or not. It's the attachment that's the difference. And what speaks into this is being able to love yourself unconditionally, being able to accept where you are, and that still invites being able to move into where you want to be. Some people may say, well, how can it feels like potentially like a bit of a bypass. It's like, well, this is just who I am, and I gotta love that and accept that. Yes, and that doesn't mean you don't get to move towards something more, I don't want to say desirable, but more more consciously aware or less ignorant. That's really the better terminology. So in the teachings, that it says that all mind-based suffering is the result of ignorance to the truth of what is, that we necessarily obscure ourselves to this truth of our limitless, divine, inherent, loving essence self. And the idea of going on this yogic path is one of awakening to the truth, one of delayering the layers of muck that are obscuring our vision through the lens that we view the world. We view the world through our distortions based on the experiences that we've had. It's this idea of samskara, these mental, emotional scars or knots that we have in our subconscious, which kind of like unconditional programming, they are things that we did at some point because they were the most beneficial thing for us to do at that time, before we had the ability to consciously choose whether or not to do it. And they become these programs that run without us even realizing. And so the more aware of our behavior that we can become, the more aware of these programs that are running without our knowledge. And then comes the invitation to be able to rewrite these programs. And this is essentially what I'm doing with mind yoga, is redesigning the architecture of the mind, so it's no longer limited by these outdated programs. It's kind of a software update, and it's really tricky, it can be at least, to do this oneself, because it's kind of using the mind to update the mind. The mind's very good because it's so based on our ego sense of self, which does very good job at wanting to defend itself. It feels threatened. It feels like it's, this notion of kill your ego. Well, I prefer rehabilitate. Because if this ego part of yourself, which is the construct of the limited sense of self, the limited sense of I, who we perceive ourselves to be and show up as we navigate the world, this person essentially that we are with our entire lives, even though they evolve and change, if this person thinks you're trying to kill it, then it's going to do a very good job at not working with you to support it. Yeah, to support you in doing that. It's going to fight you. But if you're rehabilitating it, more likely to get on track. It's like, hey, I appreciate everything that you've done so far to get me to this point. And if we work together, we can make our life so much better. And that's really what I desire to offer people, this alleviation of suffering. Because the only person creating a suffering is essentially us. Like I spoke into, there's this idea that at any moment there is a choice. The choice to abide by our programming, or the choice to reside in presence, in conscious awareness. And when we reside in our conscious awareness, that is where we find our joy. When we're in our programming, we're more inclined towards this sense of pleasure and worldly enjoyment, but it's not fulfilling in the same way that joy is. They're very different things. The ego and the sense of limited self is concerned with and can really only experience this sense of worldly enjoyment, whereas the limitless sense of self is what is resides in contented bliss, and it's being able to return to this, to then infuse it with this, so that you can fully enjoy the experience of life. And that's tricky. One, because it's esoteric and not well understood, but two, because it is tricky, because it's difficult to peel away from something we've been so attached to. And it can be destabilizing if you don't have someone or something to lay the foundation on which to build where it is that you're wanting to move. So if you're trying to figure out how do I love myself unconditionally? How do I get to this point where I can find this unconditional love to be able to then step back out into the world and find love through other people, being able to enjoy the worldly enjoyments of the sensual space? It starts from within. It starts from being able to fully love and appreciate and accept yourself, oneself. Partly that can be returning to a sense of, is this coming from a place of love, or is it coming from a place of fear? This sense of love is returning to a sense of unification. Fear is more about division. This speaks into, I could speak a lot into this sense of when we forget the essence of non-duality, we then perceive ourselves to be different and separate from others. And this creates this sense of separation, and then creates fear, and then needing to attain. If we can return to this sense of wholeness and loving awareness and acceptance within ourselves, then we can know that we're always safe, because this safety is about being able to accept oneself, and being able to know that that's freely available to you at any time. Then it doesn't matter if you go on a date and someone doesn't find you attractive, or you don't find them attractive, and you can feel empowered to be honest with them. This is kind of where the conversation ended up, is, well, if you can embody the empowered sense of sovereignty, to be so accepting of who you are right now, even if where you're moving towards or wanting to move towards because of the inevitability of change is somewhere different, if you can accept where you are right now, then that invites someone to be honest and vulnerable and feel safe in return. This idea of reciprocity. If you can give someone your safety, they can give it back. And it's not a case of, well, I'll trust you and you trust me, and I'll create safety for you and you can create safety for me. It's like, no, I'll create it, because I know I'm safe. And I'll give it to you, whether or not you take it or reject it. That's okay. And getting to that point is unpicking all of the stories that are in the way of getting there, because it's who you are at your essence, at your core. But all of the samskaras, all of the mental emotional knots, they prevent us from getting there. And that's why it requires the system update. And you can do it yourself. There are ways to do it. It's just more challenging to do it. If you want to work with someone, then you're more than welcome to reach out. I love doing this stuff. And being able to, it's kind of like, I say that stock thoughts are to the mind what tight muscles are to the body. And if you can massage out those knots, it creates the freedom of movement to be able to move through the world with so much more joy and enjoyment. This idea of being able to move from this kriya action of, I'm doing this thing because of the joy I get in being able to express this part of myself, rather than I'm doing this thing because I hope that in doing it I will get something from it. Such a difference. So I trust that something in that landed for you. This idea of kriya and karma, and how returning to acceptance and loving of oneself unconditionally lays the groundwork to be able to navigate and move through the world and invite unconditional love back in. And if that's something that is interesting to you, then message or write in the comments what landed. If you're wanting to explore this idea of mind yoga, then I'll leave a link in the description. You can find more information in videos as well. There's a whole playlist for mind yoga. Go and check that out. And I wish you all the best in your journey of returning to this place of self-love. I've been David. I look forward to chatting with you and hearing again from you soon.